But without further ado, I'd love to welcome Dan to the stage, well, virtual stage, but we're very excited to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us, Dan. Do you want to do a brief little intro of yourself before you start?
How's it, guys? Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm Dan. You can call me Dan Guest, apparently. Yeah, it's cool. I work at Cars. I'm a developer there. I think seems like there's a bunch of, I don't know if everyone here is a developer or not, but it's cool. I don't know you guys all, but this is cool. Thanks. This is cool to share the stage with Peter again. I saw you're back in rehearsals, but we can discuss that another time, I think. So should I get going?
I reckon so.
Cool beans. Go for it.
Okay, cool. Let me share my screen. What are you guys seeing? Are you seeing a background? Yeah.
Yes, seeing your background at the moment.
Sorry, I'm sharing the wrong screen. This is what, okay.
Okay.
Now you can see the slideshow. Cool, is this working?
Still a black screen on our side, but should be there in a minute. There we go.
I can see the first page.
I can see PowerPoint or something.
Can you guys see it? You should be able to see a picture of it. You can see, okay, so it's there. I can't see the chat anymore, so that's why I'm like, I can only see my slides.
No, you good, we're there.
Okay, cool. Okay, so this talk is really around like what makes a good dev in terms of like ability, not in terms of morality. That was more Peter's. So we're all passionate guys. We're all passionate about what we do and we only want to improve. So the first thing I did was I decided I'd Google Jedi, like Jedi dev skill level to see what you needed to learn. And it was actually pretty basic. All you have to do is read compiler design, introduction to Java, and the fundamentals of computing 2. You can forget about the C++ book. I forgot the arrow for that. Then I decided to take it further. You know, there's a whole bunch of these new age kind of skills guys who help you improve in life. So I decided I would follow Jocko Willink and Tim Ferriss and Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan, and I would smash out like the perfect developer day. And here's a snippet of how I live my day.
Okay, so what does the
I don't know if your slides are showing.
Sorry?
I don't see the slides changing on my side.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it looks like we frozen, unfortunately.
Oh, geez, guys, it was going so well. I was digging
it. You're doing the things. Don't
Sorry,
worry.
Dan, we got you, honey. We got you.
Okay, let me try again. Is it presenting?
It's like a live demo.
Yes.
There we go. Is it showing?
It is showing now.
Cool. It's going to play a video. I really hope this works because it took me some time. Cool.
It's okay, don't worry.
Cool.
Okay, so what does the ultimate, yet normal to me, day in the life of a developer consist of? Well, instead of this...
Doesn't work for me, Dan. It's frozen.
Are you serious?
I'm getting the audio, but the video is frozen.
Sorry, Dan.
Okay. You know,
are you presenting the talk? Because I think that screen is showing, but we're seeing your actual talk. The slides. We're not seeing the presentation mode.
Oh shit! So you can see my see my notes. Damn it! Oh, that's definitely not what I wanted. Okay, sorry. Let's try it this way. Oh, is it working?
Okay.
Maybe
better. Got it.
Cool.
Yet normal to me,
too easy.
day in the life of a developer consist of. Well, instead of just telling you, I'm going to show you. So waking up in the morning at the perfect time is a bit of a tricky one. And that's because Jocko Willink says you should wake up at 4:30 a.m. and start exercising ASAP. The 5 a.m. club said, wake up at 5 a.m. That is the time that you achieve. And then when you read why we sleep, if you wake up before 6 a.m., you're pretty much guaranteed to die that day. So merging all these theories into one, I decided that the answer to waking up at the right time was to never go to sleep in the first place, but rather lay down with your eyes open and always think about coding. I call this process meta sleeping. So a lot of people are also torn between what the best thing to do once you're up is. Do you meditate? Do you exercise? Do you eat breakfast? Do you read? Or do you just start working? Well, the best thing to do, in my opinion, is to meditate. While doing this, you can also listen to a Joe Rogan podcast and read a book while continuing your 400-hour fast for the week. The solution is so clear in my mind, actually, I'm surprised I haven't read about it anywhere online. So, awesome. So now that that's done, I guess you go straight to coding, right? Wrong. Just finish up your second half marathon, and you're good to go. Great, now let's start coding. I know that all the best developers are using Vim, and why wouldn't you? You can finally do away with that stupid mouse and edit code like a real pro. Let me just change this variable name and save the file using the simple key command. Cool. Once that's done and you're working, my work involves solving convoluted algorithmic problems to very niche scenarios, like we all do. And once I'm finished working, it's playtime, but I only give myself 15 minutes of a restful situation. And what does that involve? Well, it means pouring myself a glass of South Africa's finest whiskey and playing a game of pool. But I don't want to waste my time, so I play pool against myself and I try to finish the game in one shot. And that is my day, and that is why I am a good developer. Cool. Cheers.
Okay, cool. So hopefully it's clear that only some of that is partially true. Before I go down the train of like, what it actually means to be a good developer, I want to take a look at the fundamental knowledge that you're expected to have when doing web programming. So yeah, I've got another video for that.
So before I go into how to actually be a good developer, I want to cover what you should know as like a regular web developer. So it's pretty simple, right? All you need to know is like HTML, you need to know some CSS, you need to know some JavaScript, and like a server-side language. Also, you need to know how to host. Simple, right? Well,
Two, y'all see this? Bro, this test's about to be a breeze.
so before you get started with, you probably HTML, that's a given. But then maybe you're using React, so you need to learn some JSX, or using Vue, so you need to use some Vue template. With CSS, no one likes playing CSS anymore, so you're going to have to learn less, or Sass. With JavaScript, as I said, no one likes to learn JavaScript anymore, so you're going to have to learn a JavaScript framework, Angular, or React, Vue, or one of the million other ones. And then on top of that, you're going to have to learn some state management, so like Redux, or Vuex, or whatever state management library you guys are using. And you probably actually have to learn jQuery as well. Because chances are you're going to work on some legacy code, or the new code base you're working on is just using jQuery for whatever reason. Cool, we're done with JavaScript, right? Well, you're also probably going to have to know how to pack it. So you're going to have to learn Webpack, or Rollup. Maybe using Grunt, or Go. Depending on how you import packages, you're probably going to have to know NPM, or Yarn. Okay, then the server side is easy, right? Well,
Why am I supposed to know this?
now you're going to have to learn the server side language. So you're going to have to learn either some object orientation or some functional programming, or maybe you're working on another old system and some procedural programming. And with that, you're going to have to learn inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction, and concurrency, and a whole bunch of things that come with a complex server side. Then, hosting, that's easy, right? You're going to have to learn how to use AWS, or Google Cloud, or DigitalOcean. And then on top of that, maybe using Kubernetes, or maybe you're deploying on Firebase. Sorry, I got a bit carried away with the last word. I actually didn't even realize that I didn't even cover everything that I wanted to cover. You're still going to have to learn Docker. You're still going to have to learn how to set up your environment locally, and also how to get that same environment working on the server. You're going to have to learn Git, because that's pretty much how everyone handles their version control these days. You're going to have to learn bash scripting, because chances are there's going to be some scripts that you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to understand them. You're going to have to learn how HTTP works, and how post methods, get methods, put methods work. You're going to have to learn how to create a certificate on the server, SSL and TLS, and what that means, and how it affects you as a web developer. You're going to have to learn how to set up DNS, edge caching, also maybe caching using a tool like Redis or Memcache. You're going to have to learn the MVC pattern, and you're most likely going to have to learn a server-side framework also. You're going to have to learn some SQL and how to interact with the database. Actually, you may have to learn NoSQL as well. And you're going to have to learn how microservices work. Or maybe you're going to have to work with a monolith and get around the complexities there. Also, with that, you're going to have to learn maybe a queuing system, or how to run jobs, cron jobs. I didn't even write that down. So long story short, there is really a ton of stuff that goes into building a full-on web application. The truth is that building websites these days can be crazy complicated, and you can use any number of these technologies. And practically, you can't be an expert on all of them. So does this mean that a good developer has to be an expert in all these fields? The truth is no, and I'll explain why.
Cool. So once you know all those things, and you're familiar with the tech, you're a good developer, right? Well, wrong. You're just a developer now. So we want to focus on how to be a good developer. So what I did was, I did what any developer does, and I tried to Google to find the answer. I even asked people on LinkedIn, and this is what the internet said. To be a good developer, this is what you need to learn. You need to learn like master regex. You need to be pro at debugging. You need to be boss at SQL. Contribute to open source, and never stop learning. And there's like specific things you can focus on learning. You need to read loads of books. You need to use a new framework or language on every project that you do. You need to lose your ego and follow best practices. Then you also need to know when to stop. So like when your code is good enough. Then you must also know that you're not the only person who's going to work on the code you're working on. You need to learn Vim, and you need to get enough rest. So those are clear answers. So which is the proper answer? Clearly, it's learn Vim. But I just wanted to, but it's not really. But I wanted to point out that I rarely saw two people give the same answer for what they thought it was to be a good developer. And how could they? Even like technically, there are so many approaches to just building a website, and people value so many different things when it comes to coding that you can't just focus on being a web developer. We should stop focusing on being good at development. If it was really clear cut, there would be one standard test that all companies would hand out, and then you would see how good of a developer the person was that you were hiring. So you should learn tech, of course, and you should understand what best practices are. And I think every technology that I mentioned, you should know what it is and why it's there, even if you don't exactly know how to use it. But your goal shouldn't be to focus on being good and learning new tech. Rather, you should focus on being effective. So you may be a brilliant developer, but if you're not adding any value, it really doesn't make a difference how good you are. So what does it mean to be effective? Well, the first thing to know is that being good at coding doesn't automatically make you effective. A good software developer can write any library from scratch, but an effective developer will implement the library and focus on the problem that they're trying to solve. Effective developers also focus on deriving the most business value they can out of what they write versus self-indulging in the code itself. Sorry about that. Oh my word. Okay, we're just going to look at the two. Effective developers also work within their constraints and they understand the technical details. Like, for example, a smaller company may not have the dev resources or the financial backing to support load balance servers or a CDN. So work with what you have and plan your best to try for the instances when you can get what you want. Also, with that, the idea of working in software is not always to just add impressive tools or frameworks to your CV, but to use the tool set that you do have as a means to an end. Saying you've worked with the latest tech is far less impressive than saying why you worked with the tech you did. So also look at your context and your situation. Try and find an area in your company where skills are lacking and where support is needed, and move beyond the idea of you just being a technical resource. So figure out how you can best support, first of all, your team. So learn what your team knows, but also learn what your team doesn't know and try and fill in the gaps. So for example, if your team is like amazing at concurrent backend programming and can make super stable systems, but the interfaces don't look great, be the person that can improve the interfaces. Or if you have ideas on how you can make an unstable system stable, be that guy. Learn the product, not just the code. Learn about what you are selling and the problems you are solving. So don't just implement ideas. Give your own ideas and think of ways you can improve your product. For example, at Cars, we recently started eager loading the path that we think a user will take so that the app feels like way faster. And this is a code decision that went beyond the spec we were given. Also, understand the business you're in. Understand what the other people in your company do and what their pain points are. And if you can figure out ways to improve the internal workings of your company, I really think that's a good idea to do. Well, it's good to try and fix that yourself as well, if you can. So now we know what an effective developer is, but that doesn't help anyway. That doesn't help anyone. We need to know practical ways to achieve being effective in any context. And there are some, i.e. how to be a good developer. I forgot about the slide, sorry. The first thing you need to do is improve your soft skills. So much of our time is spent learning technical skills, but we actually spend a lot of our time trying to articulate technical problems to non-technical people. Making a button do what you want on a website is never as simple as it seems, and being able to explain why that is goes a really long way. Also, being able to articulate yourself in layman's terms is a great litmus test for how well you understand the issues yourself. Understanding specs. So it's one thing to be able to replicate a design or implement a feature, but you should really try and go beyond that. Make sure you understand the issue your spec is trying to solve, and then be able to see if the proposed solution is actually the best solution for the problem, or maybe it can be solved in a simpler way. So for example, if you're given the spec to create a listing page that handles like inventory history, you might be able to avoid creating a whole new page and just update the filters on a current page. Then I made this little joke. So if we force our users to reset their passwords daily, then they'll never be hackable. Oh. Okay, so then give options to problems. So often you'll be given designs and specs that have inherent issues with them. Like maybe the flow doesn't work well in every situation, but you still have a feeling of what you need to achieve. So try to work out the issues and give possible solutions on how you would go about solving them. So this is your skill as a software engineer, which maybe not everyone who's designing the spec has. So for example, you're told to implement like free shipping on orders that are over 1,000 Rand. But what happens if the user has multiple shipping addresses for multiple items? Or if a coupon was applied that made the 1,000 Rand order less than 1,000 Rand? So point out issues like that and suggest how you would handle them. This also goes with understanding the product and understanding users. But also more than that, like giving options to problems, it goes, even like if you're planning to meet with somebody, give them multiple dates when you can meet and ask them if none of those dates suit them, then they should give you multiple dates. And then you can just more effectively get to where you want to be. So also go with what works. It's so hard like not to be tempted by flashy tech that's being launched every day. But I think effective developers understand their own issues and they need to understand the issues that the tech is trying to solve. So the key thing here is like work within your domain and not in like Netflix's or Facebook's domain. So avoid blindly following fads or copying big tech companies. FANG, so like Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, they have huge scale and reach, and they have tons of engineers and they work with masses of data. And most likely you're going to be in a very different situation to them. So I'm not saying don't learn from them. I'm just saying be mindful of the strategies you do adapt from them. A big part of going with what works is also understanding the time and output compromise of the work you're doing today with the time and output compromise of the work you'll be doing in the future. So if you hack something quickly today, will you harm future progress by making it harder to implement features? Or if you work slowly today, will you harm current sales? So you must also be mindful of that. I just want to also emphasize, I'm not saying use boring tech here. I'm just saying use what will work for you and what you think will work for you 5 or 10 years from now. Okay, naming variables properly. This is probably my biggest gripe when it comes to programming, because I think pretty much half of all coding is just naming things. And when you name things well, you can really improve how you write code because you'll have a better understanding of what things are and what they're doing. So these are like rules that I've made when it comes to naming variables. They're just general rules, but I think it's important to follow the code base over convention. So we're all taught about naming conventions for different languages. But if you find yourself in a code base where the naming convention like of that language or that framework isn't followed, don't try and set a new standard. It really just makes a mess of things. Rather go with what's being used, and when you start a new greenfield project, then do things the right way. I once worked at a company where they named like PHP variables like this, where it was the variable type as small case, so A for array, S for string, and N for number, then the actual variable name in sentence case. It was so horrible that like it makes more of a mess if I just started camel casing everything. So yeah, even if it hurts, just stick with it. The second thing is avoid non-meaningful terms. So a line like this doesn't really mean much because we're using a generic term like data. and total count. It's not descriptive. So rather use something like this where instead of data, you call it products, and you're trying to get the total stock. So even if a product has a count, you can understand what it's being used for. It just makes things a lot more clear. Also, promote clarity over conciseness. So I think outside of anonymous functions, it's normally better to go with writing full names rather than abbreviated names. So something like this isn't very readable when you actually go into the for each loop, and something like this is far more understandable, especially so you don't need to see the context of what SP is. Lastly, I want to say is keep code up to date, like as much as you can. By doing this, you keep your code solid for as long as possible. You have like far less security concerns, and your code will most likely be a bit more performant. And you'll also get the chance to use new features and hopefully read the latest documentation. Yeah. So in summary, I don't follow, it's not like I am the best, most effective programmer in the world, but I've noticed that these are the traits when I've worked with developers and I respect them, I noticed that they have these traits. I want to just try and focus on being effective and helpful and improving your company or your product versus your own skill set. And I think it's a lot harder to do actually, but it goes a long way. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. If you want to catch me on YouTube, I got a YouTube channel called On the Code Again, and like and subscribe.
That was awesome. Thank you, Dan. Guys, I'm going to open the floodgates now. What questions do you have? Anybody want to ask anything? There have been a lot of comments, so
I haven't seen anything coming through.
Only good things. Okay, cool. Yeah, there have been some fun chats. Alrighty, anybody got a question that they wanted to add or pop in the chat? All right. Okay, Google, what's the meaning of life? That is just going to trigger all of our Google hopes. Thank you, Alex. Okay, cool.
So my actual question, if you guys can hear me, is you were speaking about what makes good code, and generally I kind of go towards like there's your sonar cubes and your cognitive complexity measurements in your lenses, which kind of just solve this, but at least on some level to me. I'm just curious what your thoughts are around using those kinds of tools to get there.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. And do you mind repeating that? Because of that, there was a noise. Yeah. Hello? Thoughts on cognitive complexity. Oh, okay. I don't know. Linters are such a weird thing to use. I've never used one. All it does is format the code so that when people do pull requests, it's looks the same. I don't know. Like coding standards are super weird because they also they change throughout time. I think if you start like a brand new project and you want to set it up with a cognitive complexity linter, then do it. But I wouldn't add one in after the fact. I think, yeah, it's hard to say when I haven't used one before. I don't know how the hands up feature. Sorry, I don't know if I answered your question properly. I don't know how the hands up feature works on Hangout on Teams.
It looks like it's not popping up. Ali, you had a question you wanted to ask.
Hi, thanks guys. Hi Dan, nice to meet you.
How's it?
So when you are interviewing for developers, I mean, you spoke about the soft skills, and I'm in HR, so for me, the soft skills are hectically important. When you interview a developer, what percentage weighting on average would you give to technical capability versus the soft skill capability?
I don't actually do the interviewing at CARS, but Peter, if he's here, he does. I think he can probably answer that for you.
Yeah, no, I know Peter's problem. I know, well, not his problem, his answer. So I was just curious to find
other
some
Peter.
perspective.
Other Peter, sorry.
Sorry, Anine.
No.
So yeah,
Okay.
I'm Peter from Cars, and I do a lot of the hiring there. And I would say just offhand, probably 50%. Like we put them through tests and stuff, so that's the early rounds that might eliminate some candidates. But at the end of the day, in our competency-based interview, it's mostly about soft skills, team interactions, how do you handle conflicts, how do you give feedback, stuff like that. And so I would say in that last part, it's probably 50% of it comes down to the soft skills of the person.
That's great, Peter. Thank you. Because I think we're getting to a point where we are realizing as technical companies that the ability to communicate, collaborate, and work within a team is just as important as the ability to program. You can be the #1 WizKid software programmer, but if you cannot communicate with your team, you're not going to be successful. So it's quite invigorating. So thank you. It's lovely to hear that you share our view.
Yeah, I think it's like there's like no like superhumans in the team. Like it's always a team effort, and if somebody can't communicate, it really makes things difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Wayne, you had a question.
I'd sort of like say I'd rather work with someone who's in that region of like 70% good as opposed to 95% good and poor attitude. 70% good at programming and 110% in attitude is much easier to work with. You actually get more done.
Yeah, I agree. It's like also like the skill level. It's you can supplement it with somebody who can do the work. Whereas the attitude, if you have anyone with a bad attitude in the team, it brings down the whole energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, guys. Anybody else? Last questions before we move on.
I have a question.
Good, awesome.
So, have you ever found yourself, say, potentially working with somebody who is incredibly highly skilled, but has also shown themselves to be completely ineffective? And what have you done in terms of perhaps trying to address that? Or if not, what might you do to try and address that?
So I have worked with somebody previously who was, you could see that they knew what they were doing, but they would always like go on their own mission versus going the direction that the company goes, like the direction that the company went. So there was always some sort of friction there, and that person didn't last. That person, didn't last in the company. So that's how that got sorted. I have worked with people where, like, we've learned to work together. I worked at a company, and then there was one very senior guy above me, and I think the more he saw that I was willing to learn, the more that he opened up, and the more the responsibility was shared. So that's kind of how he handled it. Yeah, I think it's a really tough situation to be in, where somebody is technically capable but not able to, but not like open personally to any criticism, or not even criticism, just to like share ideas. So you do get the guys who are good, but their idea is the way, and it's a struggle. I think I forgot half the question though. I don't know what the last half was.
No, so I mean I haven't personally had this problem, although I do know people for whom this has been a problem. People who are incredibly intelligent, who are highly skilled at what they do, although are not as effective as maybe we would like. So I think, Wayne has sort of posted the comment, not a team player. I think that's part of it. But it's also, I think, other things you've mentioned, things like listening to what the customer actually needs. There's that old project management cartoon with the tire swing. as you know, also as an example, you know, being effective, I think sometimes doesn't necessarily take a lot of skill. And obviously for people who are highly skilled, they might quite value that, and sort of saying that actually maybe overdoing this sort of affects their ego in a sense, I suppose.
Yeah, actually, I worked on a system once where it was so over-engineered for the job it was trying to solve that the product itself, even though on paper would look amazing, it was actually it was a bad product, and it was a struggle to work on. And I'm actually not even sure if it's still being used today. But I have been in that position where the guy, he was overthinking so much. He was his own worst enemy, because he was like, you know, tons of abstraction, tons of trying to do things the proper and the cool way and the current way, and it was detrimental to the product at the end.
Yes.
Yeah,
I would agree.
Yeah, but to be honest, I haven't encountered it too often.
Yeah, so I think Rian's point.
Cool, thanks.
Awesome. So Ali, you had a question still? I see your hand still raised.
Sorry, wasn't meant to be.
It's okay. Yeah, so I agree with Rian. He says, I once had to take over a system built by one of those. They did it solo. No one else was allowed to touch their code or even look at it. They saw it through the analysis to dev, to prod, to Lightspeed, and the business loved them for it. When they left what was largely an unmaintainable mess with no test cases that no one else had any context on. It looks good over the short term, rapid delivery and all that, but it's damaging to the organization over the long run.
Yeah, that's
sounds
I
like
think that happens quite often, because people often have these like, oh, we hired this guy and he's like, he was amazing, and then you look at his code and it's like, it wasn't amazing. It was, you know, it was his project and no one else's. So I think if you like go through the pull request if you do pull requests and that kind of thing, and you make sure that you share knowledge in your team as frequently as you can, then those hurdles kind of you can mitigate that kind of thing happening. But the company also has to want it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dan. That was awesome. I'll definitely grab some of the videos from you as well so that we can share them with the team. And as you mentioned, guys, if you want to do subscribe, they are awesome videos. Thank you so much for joining us. It was awesome.
Thanks a lot, guys.